Alright, welcome back Urban Soldiers Dynamic YouTube channel. We're going to be talking today about the second day of the Suarez rifle gunfighting class that we took. In the first video we discussed pretty much an overall of the class. We talked about a little bit about gear, things that we did and didn't like, talked a little bit about what we did on the first day, and we ended with what, at least for me, I was interested to see, with everything that we had learned on the first day, how are we going to implement it on the second day. So I actually have some notes that's going to help me. And we're going to talk about, first things we're going to talk about is the major difference between day one and day two. Then by going into that major difference, or I should say major differences, then we're going to talk about some of the things we did, like shoulder transitions, another drill we called the Tahiti dance. Suarez calls it getting off the X. That's kind of what we're going to adopt as well, as getting off the X. We'll jump into multiple threats, and then the final thing we'll talk about is what we did at the end of the day. Two drills that we did, which I think were, it allowed me to see that when you start adding things like time or even distance and you're under pressure, what does that do to everything that you learned over 2 days? Mm-hmm. So, the first thing is, for me, the major difference between day one and day two was, in day one, it was all about accuracy drills and what I would call static manipulation. So standing kind of there and doing accuracy drills at 3 yards, 7 yards, even out to 25 yards. But it was just getting used to your rifle, if it was a brand new rifle for everybody, or brand new optics or any of the gear that you had brought. And everything was pretty much static. There really wasn't a lot of movement.
Right.
Whereas in day two, we did a whole hell of a lot more movement, still going along with their theory, and we've adopted that as well, and that is crawl, walk, run. Let's first start out slow, add a little bit of speed into it, and then go a lot faster or add even more motion, right, more tasks. So for me, what I learned in day two was that, with day one, with all the accuracy drills that we had, you looked really good. I mean, you saw all your shots were in, dead center of where you wanted it to be. You learned quickly hold over so that you knew that if you were going to aim for dead center of chest, then, as Dave Meyer would say, shoot him in the chin. Day two, I took that even more. So, I remembered that, and whenever we did close-up shots, I was aiming for the top of the head and getting into the ocular area. So. Right. That, to me, is something that I will probably always remember, in that if I'm in close quarters, I've got to aim a little bit higher, but obviously still having the 2 to 3 inches difference. But the thing that I recognized was, as soon as we introduced a little bit of movement, my shots just spread like wildfire. You forgot how to walk. And here you are, it's like, okay, well, I know I got to put the gun up, and I know where I'm supposed to look, but now I got to move, whether it be forward, backward, left, or right. And then all of a sudden, you start jerking trigger, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, and, and on paper, it shows it. What did you see as a major difference between day one and day two?
I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. Like you said, it's like when we started adding minuscule amount of movement, you forget to turn your foot. It's like you're trying to sidestep, you're going to trip yourself.
Yeah.
Simple stuff like you normally could do every day. But that, and when you said, the shot started opening up, nobody was, that lethal as far as all the time, but you start moving and it, the whole width of the paper.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that Don Robinson had mentioned, and what I always have to focus on, and, I've got some students and even friends that, have to have that perfect dead center, 2-inch group that they're right there, and you got to remember there's a difference between, combat accuracy, which is really what we're looking for, and target accuracy. Target accuracy is great when you're standing still and you have time, and you even need it in certain dynamic situations, but you can only do that if you have time on your side, whereas with combat accuracy, we talk about just getting the size of a fist. Your size of a fist is a good, spread that is still combat effective. And that's the thing that we saw in day two was, well, what happens to even your combat accuracy when you start moving? Which brings me to a point. The one thing that I had the most trouble with, and I did not like. Not to say that I shouldn't practice it, but that I just didn't like it because it was so unfamiliar and it was so uncomfortable, is when doing shoulder transitions. You know, when we did shoulder transitions, it was hard, not only because you're shooting of an offhand and the sling that you're using, I mean, that made a huge difference. But at the same time, you don't think about, well, how quickly can you acquire your sight in order to actually fire? And when I went to left side, even if I could get my rifle sling to move all the way over, I still couldn't see the actual target. So what am I going to do? Just throw shots off, you know, or am I actually just, you know, what am I going to do? And that, to me, was extremely evident. So, I mean, tell me.
I mean, that's, you've heard me give a speech about not liking lasers. I was like, I could see that would have been a benefit, because you're fiddling a whole lot trying to get that sight picture back up when you can just go click, 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 and line it up and go. But, you know, something else that I'd seen on a different video between now and then was the use of 3D targets also.
Right.
When you're doing that stuff, because then you can actually see, you know, is it a graze or is it an actual good hit. And like you were saying with the combat accuracy, it's like nobody's calling us to make that shot.
Right.
You know, I mean, you're doing it for home defense or what have you. So I mean, like you said, fist size group, even the A zone was even larger than that on the targets that we were shooting. But with the movement, it's like you need every bit of it. Because when we go into those transitions, it was like we started off just doing it static and getting it set up, and then when you went from that to actually like moving off to X and trying to do that, and then you're adding 3 different things that you should be able to do with no problem. But when you mix them all together, it all turns into something foreign again. So. Yeah,
and as far as gear is concerned, I know in the first video we talked about what we were running as far as optics and even slings. Day 2 really made me think even more about it. As much as I want everything to be small and light on my rifle, for me, especially not, you know, I wear glasses, and so it's not like I have, you know, very good eyes to see anyway. But now with glasses, I've got to be able to get that dot in the line of where I can see, so it's not above my glasses or below. And I'm questioning now whether I'm going to run an Aimpoint Micro style versus I probably am going to try to run your Aimpoint Pro, having such a larger objective. Right. You know, I can also see, as we were talking before we started videotaping, is you had mentioned, well, what about the EOTech? And now the EOTech, again, is because aesthetically I don't like the way it looks on the rifle, that might help with even more.
Seems like it's a bigger objective.
Yeah, and so I started to really think about that. And then that brings another thing that I want to talk about, that is slings. You know, I ran a Larry Vickers 2-point sling, and it's an adjustable. Great sling. But and it's been, what, about a little over a week now that we've taken the class, and you really get to stew on everything that you've done in both days. I started watching some YouTube videos of guys who are running 3-point slings. And I know that there's some school of thought as, well, 3-point slings are just so, not difficult, but there's just a lot to them, and you want more of the simplicity, keep it simple, stupid. But does it afford you the ability to do the easy transitions and things that we were doing on day 2? And so when I started watching those videos, the other thing that I started to think about was, well, should I go to a 3-point sling because these guys are showing me how easy it is to use, or did I just not master using a 2-point sling? You know, there's something to say about when you get all of these, either whether theory-based products or ones that people use all the time, just because you snap it to your weapon system doesn't necessarily mean that you're good to go. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge to go behind it. Like, you know, we talked about the Super Ninja. So, I mean, he was just doing that underhand move as soon as he knew he had to transition to his weak side. And then the question is, well, is it easier because of for me to learn to do that so quick, to if I have to transition, because the 2-point sling was so easy to adjust, getting it tight up against your body as well as being lower, or should I just go to a 3-point sling?
Right.
So, did you find on day 2 that any of your equipment, even more so than maybe you found out on day 1, whether it worked or it didn't work, and you change it, or definitely, it worked well. It's just that you would want to learn more on it.
I think, like, after stewing on it a little bit, I don't know if my length of my sling may be an issue. We had talked about earlier about maybe using that QD mount in the rear of the sling to stretch it back to see if that would work any better versus, just going to something totally different, which I'm not opposed to. I just like to try every option and see what happens. The plate, the ASAP plate has been removed already, because I know that's not working. So I already knew I'm not going to dicker around about that. Go ahead and get it off. The mount for the sling, on the other hand, is a little bit easier because those mag pull stocks have both options.
Yeah.
So I figured try that first before we go to the drawing board. But it's pretty much more, it was reiterated day 2 between overloading PMags and the sling. Not necessarily, maybe not just the sling, but the actual mount and that stuff. Because when we were doing stuff on the move and running around as we get further in, talking about what we did towards the end of the day, you could tell it was like, yep, this is not going to work. Doesn't matter how hard you push it, it's not going to work. So, I mean, it reiterated a lot of what I was starting to catch on to day 1. Day 2, practical application was showing me that, yep, this is not going to work.
Yeah. And then another thing that I wanted to talk about is, and we didn't see it in this class, but at the shop we see it all the time. And that's the guys who, which they call it tactical, I call it tacticrap, because they put a ton of stuff on their rifles and makes what is already a heavy rifle anyway even heavier, and things you're not even really going to use. Did you find, you ran a full 16-inch Rock River, did you find at all throughout day 2 that rifle seemed to get heavier throughout the day?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, it's physical. It's going to. If everybody had the availability and the option to do something like that, I would probably go lighter. We've always talked probably 10, somewhere in there, 10, 11. Yeah. That makes practical sense to me. On the other side of the coin, if we look at it from the standpoint of how we're teaching people, it's not most people aren't going and getting tack stamps and stuff like that. So,
and I gotta say, even with my 10.5 inch, it got heavy towards the end of the day.
Well, I mean, you're lugging it all day.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much, and I don't mean heavy like, oh, I got this gun, I wish, heavy of dropping it down and patrol ready, up to shoot, dropping it down, up to shoot, and you start doing that stuff, and then bringing it into your workspace, and again, I mean, I've got 10.5 inches on my rifle, and you have 16, I try to keep it as light as possible, but it still got heavy. I mean, you could see where you start dipping down in your workspace, and, and just
like
that
working
arm
out.
position.
That's isometric stuff that we're not normally doing. You know what I mean?
So it's a big word. Good job with isometric.
I got my dictionary.
Yeah. So let's transition now. We did a drill, basically what I call getting off the X. Another term for it is called the Tahiti dance. And basically where we're all in a line, we're shooting multiple threats. And so you have your target in front of you, you have your right side target and your left side target. So you have total 3 targets. And what was interesting is again, we talk about that transitioning to your weak side shoulder, I did not like. To the point where one time I wasn't really paying attention purposefully. And thank God that we're all good students, but he said go left, and I'm like, I don't want to go left. And I went right, and shot right. And I didn't hit Super Ninja, so that was good. But the Tahiti drill, the one thing that for me, one as an instructor, but also as a student, that I took away with was 2 things. The first one is, do you shoot on the move when you're getting off the X? So at the same time that you're getting off the X, are you throwing lead? Or do you get off the X with your rifle deployed, then when you're stationary, fire? So whether it's 2 or 3 steps to get out of the way and then engage, or do you engage while you're moving? Going to your strong side, it was easy to do it while you were moving.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously in your weak side, it wasn't. So what were your thoughts on doing that? And again, there are some instructors who, they don't fire on the move, but they will move quickly, engage right away once they're in a shooting stance. And I'm not saying that either one is good or bad or better or worse than the other. They both have their place. But as a student, what do you see? Does it make sense to do that shooting on the move, or especially lateral, or just get off the X, then engage?
I mean, I think both of them have a practical application that can be, I mean, you could daydream 600 scenarios for both of them. I mean, the reality of the situation is if you're into something that serious and you're worried about getting off because somebody's shooting at you, chances are if you're shooting at them while you're moving, they're going to keep their head down. So when we were doing it, that was kind of the thought process that I was having was, okay, you know, if this is actually happening like this, then I'm trying to keep him at bay and get out of the way at the same time. You know, so whereas doing it once you've left would say, am I thinking it through, like somebody broke into the house and I catch him midstream coming through the door, yeah, he knows I'm right here at the door. So if I blow off to go to another direction and then engage, then he's not going to be anticipating that. Where, you know what I mean, like I was saying, that, or if he's shooting at me, then that makes sense. Yeah, I make him take his head down so I can get out of the way. So, I mean, I can see both. Being that I've done none of them, I was like open to whatever that day, you know, as far as what he was going through. So I think they're both valid. I think they can both be used in a good way. And when we did it, I think it was just one more step to add it, make it harder, and the harder you push, the better trained you're going to be when you're done. So,
yeah, and what I thought was interesting is you do it 2 or 3 times. I know for me, the first time it was, you know, you have the familiar going to your strong side. At that point, you're remembering, you don't have to do much with your sling, you don't have to do anything. But then when you start to go on weak side, then, you know, the first time you do it, all you're trying to do is to get your sling out of the way so you can get to the left side.
So I cheated, I just dropped the sling altogether.
But see, and that makes total sense, right? And that's the other question is, do you do what like Super Ninja does, and that is if you know that you're going to have to do that, you proactively move your arm, you know, do some arm swings to get out of it so that you can move back and forth. But what I found is the more you did it, it was like, oh, I forgot to really engage my sight. So the next time I did, I engaged my sight, but then I screwed up my sling. And the next one, it's, oh, I got to make sure I get the sling, and then you get the sling, and you forget about the sight. And by the 3rd or 4th time, you're almost getting all of the moves correctly to the point where you can actually see your target. And, you know, I thought that was, like I said, really interesting. I know for me as an instructor, it's obviously easier to teach someone just jump off of the X, get into the shooting position, and lay your rounds down. And you're right. In doing that, the question is, well, do you throw your rounds and then make them stop? Because obviously if someone's shooting at you, it's difficult for you to continue shooting back.
Right.
You're going to either get some cover or do whatever you need to do. So taking that into it, let's talk about multiple threats. So one of the drills we had, the same one, but rather than essentially moving, it was multiple threats. You've got 2 or 3 guys coming at you. Who do you shoot first? And then how many do you shoot? There was what's called board house rules, and that is nail the first guy that comes in and then go to the next guy, get him down, then move back to the first guy. The idea behind that if you're punching somebody, you know what I mean, they're going to stagger back, gives you the opportunity to take care of the next threat and then keep moving back and forth till all of them are down. Or is it shoot them till you're dead and then go to the next one? And, you know, what I took away from that is by utilizing either of those, and I really like board house rules. It's like doing failure drills where it's 2 to the body, 1 to the head, but changing it to not being a specific number or a specific area first, right? You go to the body, you do 2, then you go to the head, you holster. I mean, there are guys that are practicing how fast can I draw or how fast can I get shots out, and they're drawing their gun and going bang, bang, and then that's it. Bang, 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 bang. And they're getting used to this 2-shot. And as an instructor, you look at that and go, you're creating good muscle memory and knowing where you're supposed to be when you're going to present those 2 shots.
You're engaging a pattern that could be a bad deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, what is your take? Did you like board house rules? Do you like shoot them till they're dead? I mean, how did you, what did you take away from that drill?
I like that. Like when we were just now talking about it, I was thinking through the other thing that would have been interesting to see as far as how quickly you could get from target to target if they did, if they were like moving towards you and there was more than, 2. That way you can get a kind of a sense that if you were set up at a certain yardage, if they got to the 3 foot mark, they got to you, whatever, and see how quickly you could do that. Not for speed per se, but just to say, this is, if something jumped off, you'd be like, okay, there's 8 guys there, these are fair. I can handle this.
Yeah.
Versus, you know what, let me get out of here, find the other alternative, and just get out of here. You know what I mean? It's something like that. And then, when they were doing that, like the failure to stop, basically, like I had done, 2 to 3, 2 to the ocular cavity is what I'd first been taught. And then he was basically, the terminology he kept using was shoot them till they're dead. And I'm like, okay. And then you were talking about earlier, and I said, that makes sense now, because like you end up programming yourself to, you be in the middle of a fight, a guy shoots him twice, goes to the head, misses the headshot, but he's like, well, I shot him 3 times. I'm going back to holster.
Right.
And the guy's still coming at him, or he's jacked up on something, or whatever, and it's, subconsciously you're like, okay, this is over. And it's not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like both. I think anytime that they throw more than one option in there, I think it's more tools in your bag, and it'll help you in the long run.
Yeah, and I know like Viking Tactics has the 1 to 5 drill. And at first I thought, well, there's a drill just to show how fast you are and you can get rounds out. But it makes sense in something like this. I mean, it's very similar to the board house rules. And you got 3 targets, and you shoot the first guy once, then the next guy twice, the next guy 3 times, then you go back to the middle guy 4 times, and then the end 5 times. And it's how fast. And I think that works well, like you were saying. What's the distance? If you got 3 guys that are running at you, obviously you're going to shoot the one that's closest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But do you lay him down, or do you just punch him back to him to let him pause, and then the other 2, as they're coming closer, now you're engaging those threats a little further. So the last thing that I want to jump on is really the 2 drills that we did at the end of the day, and kind of put everything that we had learned in 2 days all into essentially a drill. And it was hard for me, for one, and that was both mentally and physically as a larger guy.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing was, it was even harder to remember and encompass everything that we did over 2 days to that. And that was, we had a drill, we had 2 targets on either side of the berm, probably, maybe 15 yards away from each other?
Sounds right.
Yeah, and we were 25 yards away from the target, 2 steel targets. And basically you had to hit the steel 5 times, you had 9 rounds, and you couldn't leave your position until you hit the target. So whatever you started at, that's where you also ended at, unless you had a DQ, or did not finish,
right?
Which I had a DNF. So, and that is where you shoot one, boom, you hit the target, you run to the next barricade, shoot from behind the barricade, and then if you hit it, you keep going back and forth like a ping pong. If you didn't, you just stayed there until you fired at it. What I found was, this started it, and it was the last drill that really showed me what I would say combat fitness. And that was, as a larger guy, just running that 15 yards and then steadying a rifle was extremely difficult in making sure that I hit those steel plates. And again, that was at 25 yards. But once you start running back and forth, it was more important. What I saw was, it wasn't so much the time that really separated everybody. It was the amount of rounds you had left, so really how accurate you were. Because for every round that you still had in your magazine, you took 5 seconds off of your time. And there were guys that hit 5 out of 5.
Right.
And that meant they had 20 seconds to be able to take off their time. And that's what separated really the top few people. So it wasn't so much that you had to rush and get through because you end up throwing shots. It was rush to get there, calm down, steady, boom, hit the target, rush to the next one. So, I mean, what did you get out of it?
I mean, that's some of the things I felt like you might have left out on that is calm down. Your sight's doing a figure 8 on you, which I don't know. I've always heard people talk about it, never really experienced it until Big Man was trying to run back and forth. I mean, it doesn't look like you could have been probably looking at the rifle and didn't see it, but I'm looking at the red dot and it's doing this. It's all over. And kind of like you said, the more you were moving, some of the stuff you started forgetting, like my offset.
Right.
You know, like, I know a couple times guys were hollering at me, you're high. You know, I'm still riding this, trying to catch it in the center, and at the same time remembering, you know, it was always after the second shot that I realized, you know, oh yeah, I got to set this off.
Right.
That and just the fitness part, I mean, there's just no getting around it. I'm a big guy. I've been a big guy for quite a while. I used to play football. Those days are gone. You know, and it's like, you can sit there and thump on your chest all you want. I said, that separated the men from the boys, and I was sitting on a bench. You know, so I mean, there was guys twice my age out there getting it done.
And not so much of, you just got to be real fit. The biggest thing is really just endurance and stamina.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a certain size and you can't change that, or, you know, there's obviously going to be a parameter you're in, and that is being able to take that same weight and run with it fast, and to be able to sustain that. And that brings us to the last drill, which really showed that. Right after we were done with that, we did a 100-yard drill where, with the rifle and the pistol, you started off at 100 yards. You did the 4 positions. You started off at the 100 yards with prone position. You went to the 75 yards, you did sitting. Then at the 50 yards, you did kneeling. At the 25 yards, you did standing. Then you ran to 10 yards, or you transitioned to your pistol, ran to the 10-yard mark, and hit steel.
Right.
5 shots, right?
3, I think.
Yeah, either 3 or 5. And what I found was that 100 yards and being able to get into those positions, especially sitting and kneeling. I mean, that's when you really start, your breathing starts to get there and you're moving that rifle. But all of a sudden now you realize you're like, man, I got all these things to do. I'm a large guy. Sorry, that's my phone there. I have to shut it off. I'm a large guy, and the other thing for me that I found is we've been doing rifle for 2 days straight. Yeah, we did transition to pistol, but it wasn't that much. I could not, for the life of me, even with a red dot, hit that damn piece of steel at 10 yards. Because I just totally forgot about arm straight, you know, punch out, just concentrate on the dot, put it in the middle, slow squeeze. I'm jerking the trigger, I'm throwing rounds. Oh, yeah. And it's, again, it's that whole combination. And what I took away from it was, don't go and take pistol classes for, 6 months and then jump into a rifle class. Stagger them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because you'll forget those skills that you know you have because you're concentrating on another type of skill set. So, tell me your thoughts on, and I know you had a disadvantage because you had the fastest guy against you. So, tell us, that 100.
I know we talked about this before. Everybody else like 50, 60 years old. Marco and I are like 30-somethings. This kid's 23. My partner. Yeah. Largest guy there, youngest partner. That worked out well. No, like you said, I mean, you were just saying it about the pistol, and I remember being on the line, learning to move off the X, and him telling me, hey, look at your shots with your handgun, they're off, you're shanking them. And as far as grip, I wasn't holding my gun right. I'm locking my thumbs. I know better. How many times have I said that to somebody in here? And here I am on the line doing exactly what I say is not the right thing to do. And it costs you accuracy. And then the upside on the running part is when we did that 100-yard, that was my relief moment because A, I knew I was at the end of it, and B, the handgun didn't weigh anywhere near the rifle by the end of the day. So when we got up there, it was just like I'm pointing and clicking, and all I had to do was put the muzzle in the 12-inch circle and pull the trigger. Where before I'm trying to concentrate on that little dot, and can't even see any markings on the target. I mean, I got better eyes than you do, and I couldn't. I think at 25 yards, I finally started seeing the rings on the target. It was, but I mean, there's a lot to be said about fitness. I was like, I kind of half butt went through, getting better at what I was eating before the class, walking a little bit. I should have been doing a whole lot more. I think my issue, a lot of it was me working outside on a regular job. I figured, that's no big deal. It's like working on the train. I can handle it.
That's a good point.
It was different.
And that's the thing I really want to find out your opinion. I mean, I've done a couple classes, and I'm not saying that, I can bounce back right after, no problem, because when you get back, you are tired. And I mean, not only mentally exhausted, physically as well. Tell me, with you doing somewhat of a manual labor job as your normal one and being outside, Did you find any huge difference in these 2 days being outdoors? And yeah, you're having fun.
Mm-hmm.
But what big difference did you get between what you were doing on your regular job and this?
Well, it's the muscle stuff. It's like you're not using that stuff. Say, on my job, I'm not using those same muscles, or if I am, I'm not using them in that way. So you're gonna be sore from that because you're using new stuff or using old stuff and stretching it out. And then the other part of it too is there's like you don't realize it until after the fact, but there's like a mental drain. We rambled on real bad in our first video, and as I watched it, I'm looking at it, I was like, we're both about asleep talking, and it's like, and then you start realizing, you know what, oh, that's probably because we're trying to run everything, and it's like, you got the computer running in the back, and you're trying to do stuff out the front, and it's just like, I mean, one of the things I kind of noticed, Shelly doing those marathons, a lot of times she'll come home and she's like done. Yeah. It's like she'll hibernate until the next day. And I'm like, well, she runs every day. You know what I mean? She like practices this every day. And we shoot at the range, but we're not out there running in the sand pit.
Right.
And I was just like, we got back into the car and we were driving home that last day, and it was like, all I could do was autopilot. It's like, because I didn't want to think about any traffic issues. I didn't want to think about, do you want to get something to eat? It was just like, poof. And then that was it. But one of the things that I've been seeing after the fact that I really, I need to take more serious. I mean, we both know Dan. That was one of the first things he asked me. He goes, well, what are we going to do about the weight? And I said, yeah, did you have fun in the class? But the first serious question was, what are we going to do about them pounds? And he's right. And then as we were talking about it, I signed up for Warrior Talk because all the old guys were getting on me. And I realized they got a whole blog section that's just on fitness. I mean, they call it Warrior Fitness, which might be a little crazy, but it goes along with their theme. So I was like, it's all an all-encompassing thing. I'm starting to realize that, it's not just you pay the guy to go to the class and it's like, here, have a nice day, here's your certificate. There's a lot more involved with these guys, and the more you get involved with them, with the communicating on the blog and taking the classes, it's like they have a multi-tiered idea of, it's great to do this, but be able to do this. Yeah. So, and it's one of the things that I've taken away from it that we've, at least in my house, I've been trying to incorporate more and more every day because I want to keep doing this. It's something I like doing. I see a need for it, and I enjoy doing it, so I want to be able to physically do it. Yeah, and for me, when, what I look at it is, you think about how much money you spend, not only money, but time and other resources, but in taking these classes, classes aren't that inexpensive. They're, not cheap. Right. Then you have your ammo, right? It's inexpensive. Yeah. Then you have your ammo. Then you have your time, whether it be time that you're taking away from your job or anything else, or even your family. Yep. You add all that together, and it gets expensive to do it. But what I look at it as is it's insurance. It's life insurance for me. If I want to make sure that I protect my family and do it to the best of my ability for when anything happens, then why wouldn't I spend that money? Just as I would spend the money on life insurance, I'd spend the money on car insurance. In some places they force you to do it, especially if you've got a mortgage on your house, you have to have mortgage insurance, or you have to have homeowners insurance, and you know what I mean? But people don't think of it because it's an elective, that things like this are insurance. And so then, if you were to basically, if I were to go to my wife and say, listen, with everything that we have, I want to make sure you're taken care of, and so I figure let's get life insurance on me for $500. I mean, that should be enough for just, cremate me or bury me or whatever. She'd look at me and be like, hell no, we got all these other things that'd be more. So when I look at that, the question is, well, how much is your family worth? And how much should you spend in training? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that you should go to very, very expensive classes. Go to inexpensive classes. Just go to a lot of them. Right. It's worth it. And the reality is, you got to budget it. I mean, you can't rob Peter to pay Paul. And then, I went to a class, but I came home and there was no lights on. Yeah. I mean, you gotta do your way in out. But I mean, it's necessary. Mm-hmm. And it's just more tools. You would do it with anything else, like you said. It makes sense. Yeah. Well, that's our second day AAR for the Suarez Rifle Gunfighting Class. We made an announcement on our Facebook page, which you can probably see in the background. Urban Soldiers Dynamic. We've got a new logo. We will be getting t-shirts, stickers, morale patches,
and everything done up in the next couple weeks. So for anybody who wants information on our classes or wants to know schedules or bios or anything like that, just go to urbansoldiersdynamic.com. You can visit us on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/urbansoldiersdynamic. And at the comment section, leave comments, questions, concerns. Leave us comments on other items that you guys want us to do videos on. We're going to start doing video reviews of not only different skill sets, but we're going to review as much as we can equipment, different types of guns, EDC, things like that. What do we carry? Why do we pick what we pick? And remember, a lot of the stuff that we're doing is kind of our opinion. We do take into account a lot of other information, and I'm just like you, and Pork Chop is like you as well. We're on YouTube and we're looking up people's reviews and seeing. The only difference is that we have somewhat of an advantage that we can go out and buy the stuff, try it, and if we don't like it, then just get rid of it.
Yeah, access.
The access is there. So because of that access, we want to be able to give you as much information as we can. So if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let everybody else that you know about it, and we'll continue to do videos like this. Other than that, thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel, and we'll check you later.